I'd like to welcome everybody to this week's Belonging series interview, Exploring the BAME Experience by Imperial as One. And this week we've got the real pleasure of having our guest, Reneth McKenzie-Schoetz. And I'm going to let Reneth tell you about some of her journey, but she's the director of, sorry, just a minute. She's the director of the Association for BME Engineers, as well as being a mechanical design engineer herself. So, Reneth, it's really good to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
And, you know, I'm just really interested in your story and finding out a little bit more about what it is that you've done and your sense of belonging. So if I could just start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, tell me a little bit about your early childhood, your background. What was it that gave you your motivation and your sense of belonging?
I think as with most young people, we look for references to family, and our guidance is often our parental structures that are set in place. So the sense of belonging and an identity came from my family background.
Mm-hmm.
My parents are of Jamaican descent, and they came in the early 50s to the UK. So my reference points whilst being born in the UK often harked back to the Caribbean rather than to the
Yeah,
UK in many senses.
yeah, yeah. So, so you're a Windrush. You're part of the Windrush generation as well, then.
I am. I'm on the end. I'm right at. I'm the younger end of the Windrush
Yeah,
generation. So a lot of the Windrush generation, their parents came in the 50s, and I was born in the late 60s. So
yeah,
I'm part of the parents of the Windrush
yeah,
generation.
yeah. So, growing up in your home and kind of like going to school and stuff, where did you get your sense of identity and belonging? You said that you, coming from the Caribbean, you felt Caribbean. When explain how that was when you were going into the British school system and the experiences from home.
So all the references that you have. I mean, and it's what every person does when they move to another country. So they bring their culture from what they know to a new environment. So home was very much based around the religion, church,
Yeah,
and also based around family values, based on in Jamaica and the Caribbean, the wider Caribbean community, because at that time in the 60s, 70s, that's, I was surrounded by a lot of different people from different parts of the world. Um, so I grew up in the Midlands, so pretty much a lot of Caribbean islands, people from different Caribbean islands, lots of different either Indian or Pakistani origins, ethnic origins. So we all sort of, and then obviously there was Irish and some English. So my encounters were very much mixed.
yeah,
But my value system was very, very West Indian.
yeah.
What was good and bad came from my parents and how they saw the world.
Right. I totally understand that. So in terms of when you were in what was it that drove you kind of like towards, because I know you're a mechanical engineer. What was it
Yeah.
that drove you towards kind of like that um that profession, as it were? What influenced you to decide that's kind of like the area which you wanted to specialize in or to go into more?
My path was not a direct path. I think lots of people are in that position
Hmm.
where we don't take a direct path.
Mhm.
So originally, I wanted to be an accountant. I was always maths orientated. I've always been good at maths. But at the same time, I was the one, my father, in the old days, cars now work very well.
Yeah.
But in the old days, cars used to break down quite often. So you would have to stand with your parent whilst they fix things. So you'd be passing the spanner, putting the light on whatever they want as they either stood over the engine or underneath the car. And then also I had, I had a brother who basically used to fix a lot of things. He was very curious. So, as I was the youngest out of 7 children, so he obviously he became an electrician, and I was the one that used to top behind him. So I had my little nudges towards that. Also, my father, he would talk about engineering and how he went towards studying engineering, mechanical engineering, and at a certain point gave it up because he had a family to feed and realized, that he couldn't continue along that vein. So there were the pointers go in that direction. And then at some point or the other, I when I got to I wasn't that confident when I was younger. I just had a very busy life outside of the school academic world. My dad was at the time a vicar, so it was based around the church and church events, etc.
Yeah.
So I was more engaged in that, but still having ambition. But there's a point where I just, realized that being an accountant wouldn't actually suit the whole of my personality. So went on this sort of search for, another career. And I did this aptitude test. And one of the things came out was, you have the ability to do engineering.
Yeah.
And so I sort of, in a roundabout way, in the old days, you didn't have computers, you didn't go online, you had books in the library. And in the library, it would give you a list of careers in engineering. And so I literally read all these different engineering careers and worked out that I would be happy to either be a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer.
Right.
And I had this interest in robotics. Don't ask me where it came from. I was just one of those curious people that sort of something sparked it. Probably listening to the radio, I heard something and thought, oh, that must be interesting. And I remember I was like in my early 20s by this point, because I'd passed and quite a few exams, but wasn't happy with where I was going.
Right.
So I remember applying through UCAS, getting my qualifications, applying through UCAS, and then being offered a place at university and having the options to either become a mechanical or an electrical engineer.
Right.
And I think at the point I sort of sat and I went, because I based it around me. I thought, well, what do I actually like? Which, my interests have crossed the two lines often. And I just went, well, I like cars, and I like planes, and I like trains, and I like the hands-on things. So I will opt for mechanical, and literally that is how I ended up choosing mechanical engineering. It wasn't definitely wasn't a straight road.
So with the exception of the influences which you got from your brother and your father, who kind of like were very engineering or problem solving orientated, did you get any other external influences that were saying, well, one, you're a young black girl, right? Was there anyone who was saying, yeah, you can do this, or kind of like, because it sounds like you're pushing against the tide, as it were.
I was absolutely. I mean, if I was actually thinking back, when you're asked certain questions, you start to think back to, yourself. And this was not part of, there was no real encouragement by school or anything to go in this direction. In fact, I actually remembered that that I actually took physics at secondary school,
Yeah.
and there was myself and another girl in the class, and in fact we were completely ignored by the teacher. The teacher did not pay any attention to myself or the other female student that was in the class at the time.
Yeah.
So I had no other real encouragements to go this way. It was literally because, you know, from my personality based, I'm curious.
Yeah.
And so I find things,
Yeah.
and if you tell me I can't, I say, why not?
Right. So from an early age, it was kind of like, I know what you had a inner self-belief. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose being the youngest of seven, right, you had to have that bit of confidence in yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh yes. You have to be able to speak out for yourself. You have to be able to know what you think. There are 6 other siblings who are senior to you, who have opinions they believe are theirs and yours too, and as well as your parents. So you learn how to stand up for yourself, because you know, I am from a very opinionated family. We all have strong opinions,
Yeah.
and so you learn how to voice your opinion,
Yeah.
and I guess that's where it came from.
That's brilliant. That's really good to know. So just kind of like moving on to through your journey. You're at university, you're doing mechanical engineering. What was the environment like there? Because you said at school that the teacher basically ignored the 2 females. What about at university? What was it like there? Did you have that sense of belonging?
I would say yes. I think I even at uni I had a bit of a roundabout path, but you know, my when I went to university, I had an extremely good time
Brilliant.
with my classmates. I'm still in touch with them now.
Brilliant.
um there was, in my class there were 6 girls, and the remainder were guys.
Mhm.
But it was an inclusive class. We had very good teachers who pretty much went out of their way to be hands-on, approachable.
Mhm.
They never made you feel like you shouldn't be here.
Right.
They never treated you like you can't do this.
Mhm.
I do remember with the lady that interviewed me. In fact, she was one of the female engineers, lecturers there, and she actually did engineering. And I remember her introducing me to one of the organizations. At the time it was called WISE. I think it's still called WISE now, Women in Science and Engineering. And she said to me, in the past, when she was an engineer, studying engineering, she had to go through or endure the references of certain things that were very sexist. There were references to certain, I don't know, whatever they were learning about, that was quite sexist, and as a female you had to sit through it. So there was a drive there from lecturers such as her to push for comfort for a female engineer. She was very determined that fellow engineers going along that path were going to experience a better experience than she had.
Brilliant. That's quite good. That one, you had female engineers teaching you, but also helping to pave the way to make it more inclusive for future generations. That's really so. From there, how did that going on to your kind of like your first jobs and finding employment? What was that process like for you?
So again, me being me, I was a matured person when I went. I was a matured student when I went to university. So when I left university, the last thing I did was an MPhil, and that had its own story behind it.
Mhm.
And so I I sort of made a life choice. I'll say it that way.
Right.
My formal education was more towards the military, but because of a life choice in terms of, I'd met my now husband,
Hmm.
and to fulfill the other path would have meant moving. And I knew, sometimes you instinctively know that the person that you're with, that's the person you're going to marry. So, a life choice was made,
Yeah.
and I pretty much went towards the built environment, which
Hmm.
was a contrast to what I was doing before. I was, I could have gone into the oil industry, anything to do with the defense
Hmm.
sector. Those were the areas that I would have naturally gone to if I
Yeah.
had not made that life choice. My experience, once I actually got into the built environment, was actually my first boss, who I still have a link to now,
Hmm.
even many years now on, was a very good boss. I was very lucky.
Hmm.
I remember him saying to me, "You have an aptitude for learning."
Hmm.
And so, it's up to you that, engineering is, especially in the built environment, is very much about relationships. And so, my very first job within the built environment, I absolutely loved. I couldn't sustain it because I didn't live in London. I live outside of London, so my commute, etc., was more expensive than my wage.
Yeah.
And there was a point where I sort of had to make that unfortunate decision
Yeah.
to move companies so that I could, live
Yeah.
with, and make money rather
Yeah.
than
Be just
always
spending.
be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a major problem with working in London.
Mm.
The transportation, etc., and getting around, and yeah, it's a major problem. If you could have, would you have liked, because you mentioned a couple of things. There was one about the military, and kind of like working as a mechanical engineer in the military, but also this built environment. What was it that attracted you about the military, and aspects of that type of engineering?
I think it's the technology. So I actually did have a job offered to me after my master's, um, within the defense industry, and it would have been around software. So it would have been finite element analysis kind of
Hmm.
work with, but would have been with one of the defense companies, where I would have pretty much been looking at the integrity of materials on aircrafts,
Hmm.
for airplanes. And I actually had made a choice to just do that extra bit of education.
Hmm.
And the next bit of education was still military. I actually ended up in a military college. It was I was in a military college being taught by a civilian university, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So I was part of the civilian university, but surrounded by the military.
Yeah.
Um, it was surreal. I'd been at university prior to, another university, sitting on the grass. No one sat on the grass. It was just these military guys walking up and down, going morning with guns, and I'm going to the loo, and the cadets have got guns, and that was very surreal. I think in the end, other than the life choice, I think. Because I could have gone, the last study I was doing was with warships, etc. So it was about corrosion detection, and
Hmm.
how that can be detected, and that also leaves a warship a bit up for attack,
Yeah.
basically, because you
Yeah.
can get signatures of it. So I was doing that kind of study, but I sort of, I remember sitting and talking to my dad. I remember saying to him, because I was making a life decision, and I remember saying to him, I'm not, there are some times where you decide what you can support,
Yeah.
and I could have continued pursuing something military somewhere else, but I think I came to the decision that I just decided that it wasn't for me. I'm not necessarily anti-military. Our armies do what they need to do to defend us in different ways. So I'm not particularly necessarily against the military, but I think for myself, I think there was a part of me that, you know, because my work would have been more like working, you know, one of the jobs I looked at going for was working with submarines and, you know,
Yeah.
any form of detection with the, you know, for a military submarine. So it would have protected them, but there was this bit of me going, does this sit well with me and my values? Is that who I am?
Yeah.
And I think I just made that decision that maybe it wasn't the thing for me to do. I just thought, you know, I'm not going to go down that path. That was just a decision I finally came to. I just wrote it off and said no.
Yeah, and I understand that. So tell me how I know you mentioned a bit about doing the MPhil and stuff like that, but tell me how how did you get to like your current position, your current role that you've got as the director of the Association for BME Engineers? What drove you down that road? Because everything that you've said so far has always been about kind of like solving structural problems, whereas this, tell me about what it is that's got you to this position as the director.
So I in my very first job I was working alongside someone I knew, and she was very much into PR, etc. And at the time I remember her talking to me about this association of BAME engineers, and at the time, you know, the thing that's you know, maybe engineers that have been in the industry for a good 10-15 years would understand. When I walked into my area of work, I was the only, you know, the typical thing was I was the only black person in the engineering section of the company, and I was the only female, full stop. You know, the only other females did the admin, or, you know, and anything like that, or PR. They weren't, there wasn't female engineers. And so I actually, you know, remember, you know, talking to I had a good boss, but obviously you always have challenges at work. It's called, you know, personality clashes. You would have it even if you sat in a company full of your own people from your own background and nationality, or origin, ethnic origin, should I say. So you know, I remember her saying to me, you know, there's this organization, you might like them. And I didn't do much with it, but she'd sort of given me this link, and then I moved companies, and I came back towards home, and it became even more challenging because London is a lot more diverse than where I live. And I pretty much found that there was a point where I think it was about 2009, and I was at that point where I'd done quite a lot with my life, and I was like, you know what, I would like to meet people of a similar, you know, from engineering backgrounds, but I'd also like to start giving back. And I remember speaking to one of the founders of the organization, and he called me, and he was talking to me over 2009, and he was saying to me, it was near Christmas, he's saying, you know, what do you think about us? Would you like to, you know, meet us? And so, you know, that was quite a nice conversation, and I thought, oh, okay, that he sounds all right, sounds quite like a nice guy.
Yeah.
And then he said, we've got an AGM in January. So and it was in London. It was in, I think it was with one of Imperial colleges. We had had a room in one of the Imperial College rooms, if I remember rightly. And I went. It was a small meeting, and I just remember liking the organization. I liked the structure of the organization. I liked the push towards a very professional face. You know, there is always, you know, maybe not as much as before, but in the past, the stereotype of people of color was that, you know, we were very disorganized, unprofessional, late, lazy, incapable,
Yeah, all the
all
things.
the negatives.
Yeah.
And what I liked about them was that they were determined to go towards their approach was, we're going to do things professionally. These are our links. They already had linked with professional bodies, people within industries, leaders in industry. And whilst they were quite small, I just loved their approach. And so I decided on that at that point I would join the schools program, and I was a project coordinator doing schools outreach in Croydon, and that's how it started. And then over a couple of years, I was asked if I would be one of the leads in the company. The organization had moved on, and they just said, would you consider being a director? And I said yes. And that's how I became a director of the organization.
So from when I've looked on the website, it says that you work in schools, you work in universities, and you want to be like a conduit, bringing professional engineers into the classroom, into university, to show that, and they're all from the BME background, which it seems to be the main motivator here. Why do you think that that's necessary? I'm just asking the question. I know that it is necessary, but why? What is the rationale for wanting that kind of representation?
I think, like anybody else, even if you were to set us, if we all was to be sat in places of our origin, we have influencers. There are people that influence our decisions because of the way they do things, because of what who they're connected to or how they do things. And being in a diverse environment where there are lots of different nationalities. Young people often need to see a role model. They need to see someone that has gone before them, that has done it. It makes it more real. You can have a dream, but when you can see that your dream is actually, or for someone else has happened, it is more achievable. It's not such a milestone, a challenge in your mind to achieve. So in the school setting, we do use other people from other backgrounds. You don't actually have to be BAME, but what we try to do for the sake of young people's aspirations, we look for people of similar backgrounds. So in recent years, I've worked in a school where it was more of an Asian, Pakistani background, Muslim. We tried to find someone from a Muslim background, to do a talk, and it wasn't necessarily that they were of a Pakistani background or an Asian background, but they were Muslims. So they had there was a connection. Within the wider spectrum, we try to, on the professional level and the graduate level, we look to talk to young people to help them to, overcome any challenges or hurdles they may have. There are so many young people, especially at the transitions level, which is our universities team, who pretty much don't have, they've gotten through university, but they don't have any interview skills. They're not always comfortable or confident, and it is a challenge for the most confident person. But they don't have the skills or the understanding of how employers work. They don't know how to present themselves or project themselves in the best possible way. And some things are cultural, some things are confidence. Sometimes it's literally just having somebody of a professional background who understands you or can relate to, that can help you. So the BAME perspective, everybody has mentors, well, not everyone, quite a few people have mentors, and some of the most successful people who have mentors that look like them.
Yes, right.
And what we sort of offer is almost like a guiding hand to a young person. But you know, our organization is the life cycle of an engineer, so we also look at the professional aspects. You know, there's one thing to get a job. How do you attain your job? How do
Right.
you get to chartership? So
Yeah.
we do, you know, we have professional engagement in that way
Yeah.
through our mentoring or through networking. So there's quite a few things that we do. We want, the aim is to almost be a group of engineers that stand in the engineering space that can actually engage with, you know, government, or with professional bodies,
Yeah.
as well as industry and young people, to sort of, you know, talk about engineering in all its aspects.
Yeah.
You know, and we, you know, that's what we've managed to do. We have teams that work on different aspects of all those things that I've just discussed.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. That's really encouraging. Because I remember reading on the website where it said that the industry itself only has about, I think it was about 2 or 3% people who class themselves as BAME. Whereas when you look at the universities, there's I think it was about 20 to 23 or 24% who have got engineering degrees from a BAME background. And so there's that kind of like, just correct if I've got the wrong statistics, but there seems to be a kind of like a disconnection with people are interested, curious, but they don't seem to then be going, and the transition, the pipeline doesn't necessarily seem to be in place. But your organization seems to be working in a way to help them to move from one position of desire and knowledge to a position where they can apply the knowledge in the setting where they want to. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing. How would you go up? I don't know. I'm just really encouraged by what you're trying to do throughout the whole process. Um, yeah, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
I do think that well, you know, the drive for us is that, you know, we are looking at the future of our, you know, future generations. You know, I think if I remember rightly, we are about 6% of the population in general as
Yeah.
BAME, and so, you know, there I think, I'm not going to get my figures precisely right. I don't recite them very often, so I know that we are there is about, I think it's about to 20+% within the professional, you know, within the academic world. But then there, you know, some of them, some of the engineers that are BAME are national and international, and then so some will return to countries of origin and others
Right.
will remain. The so the 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 issue really is that there is sometimes a draw off. Some young people have problems finding jobs. Some are go to other sectors, such as banking is one that is often used, because engineering is so flexible. You can actually you can move across to another profession.
Yeah.
But some of this is also about retention, you know. So there is that today, but we also look at the fact that, you know, by a certain point, from now, you will have a larger proportion of the population that are BAME. So how then do you know, there is a skill shortage. There is always a skill shortage in the engineering world. So if there's a skill shortage in the engineering world, you know, there is a clear drive or opportunity for engineers from BAME backgrounds to be introduced to this world. Also, if you think about the scope that an engineer or engineers cover, that's those sectors service us as individuals. So we as individuals should be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, you are being given, you know, all the things that we use, where, and etc. I know that I'm within a sold community, so I don't need to explain everything.
Yeah.
It is driven by engineering. We influence a large factor of our living life, of our living world. So you know, you need to have our voice in there, how we engage, how we think, how our concepts or perceptions of the world,
Mm.
um, our experience influences the way that we think. So it also influences what we can deliver within a group, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of those things, if you bring them together, you know,
Mm.
that's what we're trying to do. We are definitely we have a lot to offer, and you know, the only way that you can bring this to life is when you engage in a way that makes engineering relevant. You know, we have sport on TV all day. You know, most young people want to be footballers or someone in sport. Nothing wrong with sport, but there are other careers, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it accessible to people and make them feel supported, so they feel, you know, they're not the only person walking into the room and there's no one they can network with, to make them feel, you know, like that challenge they had that particular day,
Yeah.
they've got somebody they can speak to. So that's what we're there for.
You know what? That's a brilliant way to summarize it, because it then kind of like feeds into the whole idea of this series, which is about belonging. You're trying to help them to feel that sense of belonging within
Absolutely.
organizations, and to say that actually you do have a place where you do belong within
Mm-hmm.
this arena, within this setting. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I'm just wary of the time, so I'm going to just open up and see if there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question. If not, I'm quite happy to continue to ask some more questions. Are there any questions that anyone within the audience would like to ask?
Hi, Wayne. Oh,
Hiya, Sarah.
Hi.
I was trying to start my camera. It's been a bit, my laptop's playing. Oh, here we go. So it's sort of a half question, half comment. So it's when you're talking earlier about doing physics at school, and then it kind of reminded me of when I was choosing my A levels, I had actually chosen physics as one of my options. But as it turns out, some of the other, so I was doing maths and that was biology and Russian and physics I put in. Yeah, it's for another day, Wayne. But on the first day back of sixth form, walking through the corridor, and one of the heads of science walking past me was like, "Oh, Sarah, yes, there was a clash with your timetable, so we've switched you out from physics to chemistry," and carried on walking. And that was the decision made.
It's terrible.
And so now when I see, I like biology and biochemistry and the science that I went into, but now when I see things that are coming out with engineering and stuff like that, I'm always like, oh, I did used to do a lot of kind of that side of stuff when I was younger. Why didn't I go into physics and engineering again? And then I always go back and remember that, oh yes, because that physics A level was taken away from me. And I wonder if, what are the reasons, or speculating on the reasons why they felt that it was something that could be a decision so easily made, especially with the fact that I was doing maths with mechanics, which was why I was
Yeah.
doing physics as well.
Yeah, which would actually get you into engineering. It's exactly the right line. To be honest, I don't, I think for a long time there was a disconnect with engineering and females, to be honest. I think a lot of organizations would just see, or people would see engineering as a male dominant or a male career path, rather than understanding that, you know, we all use engineering, we all are influenced by it, but I think it's just taken such a long time for it actually to become a relevant part of a conversation. You know, it's something you had to almost find by yourself, or have someone in your family sort of encourage you to go that way. I didn't really find it in the academic space at school level.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Sarah. William, I believe you've got a question, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, very interesting talk. Following on from that other point about, in a way, the area sort of being white male dominated, then I wonder, is it enough just to say, let's put some more women faces and some more black people in there, or does actually the subject, the discipline, does that actually need to change itself, the way in which engineering is done and conceptualized, or is engineering just one of those things? Engineering is engineering, or can it sort of be made to be more, I don't know, culturally relevant, specific, friendly, to enable that diversity to flourish?
I mean, there's always a conversation or an argument to be had around that, and you know that is the curriculum conversation, which goes back to even school. You know, science is not related to mostly to any it's mainly the gender for science is mainly mostly male and white. That's the curriculum taught, and so it's almost like, you know, if you focus in on that, that would be your mental barrier. So I would agree that, you know, making it more relevant does matter. I mean, we have over our schools program done a similar thing where there's a guy we use called Robin Walker, is called the History Man, and he's actually done presentations for our students where he's shown black inventors, you know, from Britain as well as from other parts of the world, and their influence into our society. And you wouldn't necessarily know that all of them are all black, because some of them have European names. So yes, it does make an impact on how we perceive science and how we see our place in science. So I do agree that that does have an impact. I don't think that we should just be put in anywhere. I think, you know, like anything else, you know, when we're employed, anyone that's employed wants to feel that they were employed because they can do the job. And, you know, so, but I don't see that your race or your gender should be the reason why you shouldn't get a job. I think it should always be down to ability. Hopefully I answer that.
No, I think you're 100% right that it should be based on the ability. I think one of the things we should also think about is ensuring that we're giving everyone the opportunity, because oftentimes there are prerequisites which some people seem to have access to and other people don't have access to, which sets them at an advantage. So even if you have the ability, they've had a slight advantage, which means that it puts them that step ahead of you, even though not theoretically you would both be able to accomplish the task successfully.
Absolutely, which is where, this is why I like the organization I'm in, because that's the point, you know, giving young people the, you know, we do for our young students in the school setting, we do mock assessment centers, so they work with the large consultancies or industry, and they actually go through the experience of real interviews, and they get feedback and they get assessments. The same at university level. It then gives you that leg up that you probably wouldn't get otherwise. And you know, we've had especially at the university level, we've had you know, we've done like research on it, and we found that in a year after a young person's done our transitions program, about 70% of them get a job. So, you know, there is the feedback. I've gotten verbal results from teachers that have said, you know, if it wasn't for your program, our students wouldn't have gotten, you know, high paid apprenticeships. So I've actually had that feedback from teachers as well. So, you know, that's the point. That's from our perspective, in the setting that we are and the tools that we have, that's the leg up that we try to give young people. You know, it's the confidence to go and not be intimidated by an environment that they don't understand. You know, obviously when they go to work, they've got to work with whoever's in the company. That's the way it is. But you know, the leg up is actually, you know, now know how the system works.
That's right. Yeah, that's brilliant. I see another hand. Omar, if you want to come in with your question.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you very much for the talk so far. It's been very engaging listening to you both.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a very quick question about, I guess, kind of work that the Association of Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers does with families to obviously change perceptions about going on to higher education. Is there any kind of, any information about work that you do with families to change that perception?
Yeah, so we understand, because within the school program, we understand that a lot of decisions that a young person makes is based around family influence. So, you know, when you're a young person, if you say to your mom or your dad, I want to become, you know, I don't know, an astronaut, they'd probably say, you know, what, you're trying to be an astronaut, you're not going to be an astronaut. You know, we understand. I'm not saying that they necessarily say that, but you know, you've got to make it plausible to them. You've got to actually engage with the parents, because they actually will influence the choices of their child. So we actually do hold family events. One of the events we did with the event we did with Robin Walker was actually a family event. We've done I think not this year just gone, but the previous year, this year just gone, was an interesting one. But the year before that, what we have done, we sat with families, and we did an event called The Day in the Life of an Engineer, which was a panel of engineers who gave their life experiences about how they became engineers, etc. And so it was to engage. But we've also gone into schools at the career day level, and sort of had, you know, been involved with schools on that. And also, anytime we do any of our events, we actually send letters to the parents so that they know that if their child is part of our program, they know what they're engaged in. The other thing that we do, because we do work placements in the summer, the students who go through to a work placement, we normally engage with the parent so that they get that kind of, you know, we talk to them, say, you know, your child is off here, blah, 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 we're your link, but they also get to meet us. And so they understand the connection that their child is getting with a company, and also they get to meet us and see who we are as engineers. So, you know, there is we try as much as we can within our resources to engage with families, because we understand the importance of it.
Thank you.
That's a brilliant question. Thank you, Omar, for the question and for the answer, Reneth. I'm afraid we've come effectively to the end of our time, but I'm not going to let you go, Reneth, without asking one final question. I think I've got an idea of what you might say, but what advice would you have given to your 16-year-old self about where they would be, how their sense of belonging would develop as they go forward? Oh, Sunday, you always do this. All right, go on. Reneth, answer the question then. Sunday. Go ahead, Reneth.
Hi. I think the 16-year-old self would, I think I would just say to myself, you know, it will be all right. You know, just follow your instincts. Don't give up. I don't really believe in necessarily changing the path that I took. because I think all the experience you have, good or bad, makes you who you are. You know, they say no pain, no gain, and that is not just for exercise. It is actually for life.
Yeah.
So I would just say, you know, follow your instincts, believe in yourself, and you will get there. It's always a challenge for me. I'm always moving forward. So, you know, I would just say that to myself. Keep going.
Keep going. I like that one. Yeah. Sunday, I'll give you the last word. Right, we don't seem to have Sunday. Oh, he's put his hand up.
Sorry, I am here. Sorry, guys. I am here. I'm just finishing a meeting with my student in Hong Kong. Right. The question I wanted to ask. Thank you very much. I've been following everything you were saying. The question I wanted to ask is that making engineering, sorry to use this word, sexy. Yeah, physics and chemistry, they know how to promote the subject so well. And I go to a lot of school, I do a lot of school outreach and all that. How do we make engineering so interesting that the kids want to fall down and wanted to do engineering? What's your advice on that?
You just make it fun. If you don't, you know, you make them feel part of it, of any activity, and you make it fun. You can't make somebody do what they don't choose to do, but you can definitely make them see that it can be interesting and fun. And if they feel they can relate to it, they'll do it. And testament is, we have got, you know, I one of my testaments now is a young boy that came to one of our workshops 2012 and is now he works in the same company as one of our chairs and is on our board.
Oh, fantastic.
And his link was us, and he's an engineer. So yeah, there you go. You can make it fun.
The tricks I use, which work very well, and some of my colleagues don't like it. I said to the kids, "Did you know that engineers save more lives than medical doctors?" And they go, "What? No way, no, they don't. No, and when I'm sick, I said, listen, we provide you with clean water so that you don't fall sick in the first place. We make sure the road is safe, the car is safe, the aircraft is safe, and we provide light. You wake up in the morning, boom, you see light. How many doctors are going to be able to drive with light?" Anyway, thank you very much. I've got to go back to my class now.
Reneth, that's why I gave you the last word.
Thank you.
Reneth, I just want to say a big thank you for agreeing to come on and share your experiences.
Other buildings, will that have no natural?
My pleasure.
Right. So
you know which one I'm talking?
Yeah. So yeah, just really want to say a big thank you. And I'm sure that we're going to have some more interactions between Imperial and the Association of BME engineers, because I can see that there's flourishing ground where a lot can be achieved working together. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. I'm just going to advertise what's going to be happening next week. And it's interesting, something that you said just now, I'm going to allude to it in a second. But for next week, hopefully you can see that we're going to have Dr. Gabrielle Beckles-Raymond, who's going to be coming and telling us a bit about her story. She's an interdisciplinary philosopher, educator, writer, and strategic consultant. She is very, very good. And I really would encourage everybody to come and have a listen to what she has to say. The other thing which I wanted to just highlight is that tomorrow there's going to be a book launch. You know, today it would have been Martin Luther King's birthday. So kind of like to consider that and to move forward, we are going to be there's a book launch called I Can't Breathe, which were two of the individuals who we interviewed on Belonging back in November. and the book is now out. So there's going to be a book launch tomorrow. And it's very interesting that one of the people who's going to be there is someone who Reneth just mentioned, which is the Black history man, Robin Walker. So it will be a really good, if you've got the time, please tune into that tomorrow. The only other thing to say is that if you've missed any of the Belonging series, you can get them on our YouTube, tinyurl.com/belonging IAO. So if you want to see any of those, then please do. Once again, want to say a big thank you to Reneth and to everybody who contributed, and we'll see you again next week. So take care.
Thank you.